Jeffrey Epstein of old Hollywood. Was that Louis B. Mayer? The commissary at MGM Studios had a special instruction. If Judy Garland walked in, she was to be served chicken soup and black coffee. Nothing else. She was 15 years old. Any employee caught bringing her real food would be fired on the spot. The order came directly from one man. His name was Louis B. Mayer. For nearly 3 decades, he ran the most powerful studio in the history of motion pictures. He decided who became a star and who was forgotten. He controlled what America watched, what America believed, and what America dreamed about at night. And the system he built, the way he targeted young girls, controlled their bodies, silenced anyone who tried to speak, and deployed an entire network of fixers to make problems disappear. If any of that sounds familiar in 2026, it should. In January of this year, the United States Department of Justice released over 3 million pages of documents connected to Jeffrey Epstein. 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. The whole world is still processing what those files contain. Governments across Europe are launching investigations. Officials are resigning. Names are being exposed. And everyone keeps asking the same question. How did one man get away with it for so long? But what most people don't realize is that the exact same question could have been asked nearly a century earlier. Not about a financier on a private island, but about a studio boss in the middle of Los Angeles. The playbook was the same. The machinery was the same. The silence was the same. This is that story, and by the end of it, you may never watch a classic Hollywood film the same way again. The ending they gave him. Before we go back to the beginning, you need to know how this story ends. On an afternoon in 1951, Louis B. Mayer walked out of MGM Studios for the last time. A red carpet had been rolled out from the front entrance of the Thalberg building. Executives, actors, producers, secretaries, stagehands, hundreds of them, lined both sides and applauded as he passed. It was a scene straight out of one of his own productions. That same year, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the organization Mayer himself helped create, awarded him an honorary Oscar. Screenwriter Charles Brackett praised him for guiding MGM with foresight, taste, and quality. 6 years later, on October 29, 1957, Mayer died of leukemia. Thousands attended his funeral. Spencer Tracy stood up and called him a great American patriot. None of his victims were mentioned. Not one. Keep that ending in mind, because the story of how he got there makes it far more difficult to accept. The Rise. Louis Mayer was born in 1884 in Minsk, in what was then the Russian Empire. His family was Jewish, poor, and desperate enough to leave everything behind. When he was 7, they immigrated to a small port town in New Brunswick, Canada. His mother sold chickens door to door. His father collected scrap metal. By the age of 12, Mayer had dropped out of school to help support the family. He joined his father's scrap business, and within a few years, he was pushing a cart through town on his own. The cart had a sign. It read, "Junk Dealer." He wasn't born with power. He learned how to take it. His first break came in 1907. He was 22. He bought a rundown theater in Haverhill, Massachusetts, a place so disreputable he had to rebrand it entirely. He renamed it the Orpheum and opened with a religious film to clean up its image. Within a few years, he owned every theater in town. By 1918, he had moved to Los Angeles and started his own production company. In 1924, that company merged with 2 others to form Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. The man who once sold scrap metal from a cart was now running the most powerful film studio on the planet. And to understand what he did with that power, you first need to understand just how much of it he had. The Kingdom. At its peak in the 1940s, MGM was not a studio. It was a self-contained city. The lot in Culver City, California, spanned 185 acres. It employed over 6,000 people. It operated 6 separate production lots, connected by its own private rail line. The in-house cafeteria served 2,700 meals a day. An electrical plant on the grounds generated enough power for a town of 25,000 people. And then there was the police force. MGM maintained its own department, 50 officers. That was larger than the entire Culver City Police Department. Think about what that means. The man who ran this place had his own private law enforcement. Inside those gates, the rules of the outside world did not apply. The only authority that mattered was his. Jeffrey Epstein had a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, 70 acres, staff whose phones were confiscated, a place designed so that no one could leave and no one could see in. Mayer had 185 acres in the middle of one of the largest cities in America, and he didn't need to confiscate anyone's phone because there was no one to call. No social media, no camera phones, no independent press willing to challenge the most powerful man in the entertainment industry. Inside MGM, Louis B. Mayer was the only authority. At any given time, 16 to 18 films were in production simultaneously. Every single week, a new movie was released. And for 9 consecutive years, starting in 1937, Mayer was the highest-paid individual in the United States of America. His annual salary was $1.3 million, the equivalent of roughly $27 million today. No one in this country earned more than Louis B. Mayer. And no one in Hollywood had more to lose by crossing him. The system. The way Mayer controlled his stars was not informal. It was not based on charm or persuasion. It was contractual, legal, airtight. Under the studio system, every actor who signed with MGM was bound by a 7-year contract. During those 7 years, the studio decided everything. Which roles you took, which films you appeared in, how many hours you worked, who you were seen with in public, who you dated, who you married. The contract included a morality clause. If a star did anything the studio deemed inappropriate, anything at all, the contract could be voided instantly. But this worked in only one direction. The studio could end you. You could not end the studio. If an actor refused a role, they were placed on suspension. No pay, no work. And the suspension period was added to the end of the contract. Refuse enough times, and your 7 years became 10. Worse, under the rules of the era, a suspended actor could not work for any other studio. You either obeyed MGM or you did not work at all. Anywhere. Mayer understood exactly what he had built. In his own words, the idea of a star being born is bourgeois. A star is made, created, carefully and cold-bloodedly, built up from nothing, from nobody. All I ever looked for was a face. If someone looked good to me, I'd have them tested. If they photographed well, we could do the rest. We hired geniuses at makeup, hairdressing, surgeons to slice away a bulge here and there, coaches for everything: fencing, dancing, walking, talking, sitting, and spitting. He was not describing mentorship. He was describing manufacturing. A human being walked in, a product walked out, and the product belonged to him. The physical control went deeper than anyone outside the studio knew. MGM employed its own team of doctors. These doctors did not answer to medical ethics boards. They answered to Mayer. Their job was to keep production on schedule, and that meant keeping the stars functional, by whatever means necessary. For actors required to work 18-hour days, the doctors prescribed to keep them awake and alert on set. When the day ended and the actor needed to sleep immediately to be ready for the next morning's call time, the same doctors prescribed heavy sedatives to knock them out. Up to to work, down to sleep, day after day, week after week, year after year. Some of these actors were teenagers. And then there was the food. Mayer was obsessed with how his stars looked on camera. Weight was monitored constantly. For certain actresses, the studio commissary received specific instructions about what they were permitted to eat. Some were restricted to salads with no dressing. Others were limited to soup and black coffee. If anyone, an assistant, a friend, a fellow actor, was caught bringing unapproved food to a restricted star, they were terminated. This was not a suggestion. It was an order from one man. There's a phrase that comes up in discussions about Epstein's operation, how his staff were trained to see nothing, hear nothing, and say nothing. At MGM in the 1930s, that principle didn't need to be taught. It was in the contract. The open door. Mayer had a practice he was proud of. He called it his open door policy. Any actor, any star, no matter how big or how small, could walk into his office and talk about their problems. Personal problems, relationship problems, health problems, financial problems. He presented himself as a father figure, the patriarch of the MGM family. The stars called him Daddy Mayer. Muker in Yiddish. It means family. But one of his directors saw it differently. He said, he would prod you and question you and suck you dry of any knowledge. Mayer wasn't listening because he cared. He was collecting information. Every confession was a file. Every secret was leverage. Every vulnerability was a tool to ensure cooperation down the line. He did the same thing at his home. Every Sunday, Mayer hosted lavish brunches at his estate on St. Cloud Road in Bel Air. Former presidents attended, senators, studio heads, Hollywood royalty. The buffet was generous. The drinks flowed freely. Mayer never touched alcohol, not once. At his own parties, surrounded by powerful guests who were increasingly loose-lipped, Mayer stayed perfectly sober. Whether he was simply a teetotaler or something more calculated, the result was the same. He heard everything, and he remembered everything. The Fixers. One woman tried to fight back. What happened to her tells you everything about how the system worked. But first, you need to know about the men who made problems disappear. Every organization that protects a powerful person at the center needs operators on the ground, people who handle the specifics. Epstein had Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman from a prominent family who used her social standing to recruit, to normalize, to reassure. She was convicted of trafficking in 2021 and is currently serving a 20-year sentence. Mayer had two men. Their names were Eddie Mannix and Howard Strickling. Eddie Mannix held the title of general manager at MGM. His actual job was fixing things. He maintained close relationships with the Los Angeles Police Department and, according to multiple accounts, with organized crime figures as well. If an MGM star was involved in a car accident, Mannix handled it. If a star became pregnant at an inconvenient time for production, Mannix arranged the solution. If a scandal threatened to surface, Mannix made the calls. He also kept his own records, a private collection of files documenting the indiscretions and transgressions of MGM's stars, information that could be deployed if anyone ever tried to challenge the studio. Insurance. Howard Strickling was the head of publicity. He controlled what reporters wrote, which photographs were released, and which stories were buried. In an era before the internet, before independent media had any real reach in entertainment journalism, the head of publicity at the most powerful studio in the world was, effectively, the gatekeeper of truth. Together, Mannix and Strickling formed a machine. One handled the law, the other handled the press. And between them, virtually nothing that happened inside MGM ever reached the outside world without Mayer's approval. the woman who fought back. In 1937, MGM hosted a large private gathering, what was known at the time as a party. It was a men-only event. Young women were hired to serve as dancers and entertainers. One of them was a 20-year-old named Patricia Douglas. At that party, Douglas was assaulted. What happened next was almost unprecedented in Hollywood at the time. Douglas did not stay quiet. She went to the authorities. She filed a lawsuit against MGM. She became one of the very first women in the history of the entertainment industry to take legal action against a studio. Mayer and Mannix responded. The studio's attorneys moved to discredit her publicly. Newspaper coverage, largely influenced by Strickling's publicity department, painted Douglas in a negative light. Witnesses were pressured. The legal process was obstructed at every level. The case collapsed. Douglas never worked in the industry again. She lived the rest of her life in silence. Her story was not widely known until 2007, 70 years later, when filmmaker David Sten documented it in a film called Girl 27. For 7 decades, the system worked exactly as it was designed to work. A young woman was harmed. She spoke up, and the machinery built by Louis B. Mayer ground her into dust. This is the part of the story where it's important to remember something. We are not talking about a rogue individual acting in secret. We are talking about an institutional apparatus, legal teams, publicists, police contacts, medical staff, all coordinated to protect one man's power. Epstein had a network. Mayer had a corporation. Judy. If there is one name that defines what MGM did to the people in its care, it is Frances Ethel Gumm. The world knew her as Judy Garland. She signed with MGM when she was 13 years old. Garland had an extraordinary voice. Even as a child, she could move an audience to tears. Mayer recognized this immediately. He also recognized that she did not look like the other girls on the lot. She was shorter, her frame was different, and Mayer made sure she knew it. He gave her a nickname. He called her My Little Hunchback. He said it casually, repeatedly, in front of others. The message was clear. You are flawed, and I am the one choosing to invest in you despite your flaws. You owe me. This is a technique. It has a name. It is the systematic destruction of a person's self-worth in order to create dependency. And he did it to a 13-year-old girl. In her unfinished autobiography, Garland described what happened in Mayer's office. He would call her in. He would praise her voice. He would say she sang from the heart, and then he would place his hand on her on a girl and say he could feel her heart beating. This happened repeatedly, over years. Imagine being 13. You've just signed a contract you don't fully understand with the most powerful man in America. He smiles at you. He tells you that you're special. Then he crossed a line no adult should ever cross. And when you look around for help, your mother is outside the office collecting the money from your paycheck. The doctor who examines you every week works for him, not for you. The policeman at the studio gate is his employee. The newspaper that might print your story is controlled by his publicity chief. You are 13 years old, and there is no one in the entire city of Los Angeles who will take your word over his. The drug began almost immediately. The studio doctors prescribed amphetamine so she could work the grueling hours production demanded. Then barbiturate so she could fall asleep when they were done with her for the day. Then more amphetamine the next morning. The cycle never stopped. Her diet was controlled down to the calorie. The commissary had standing orders, chicken soup, black coffee, nothing else for Judy. She was a growing teenager, and she was kept in a state of near starvation because the camera demanded a certain silhouette. The pills, the hunger, the manipulation, the hands in the office. Year after year, from the time she was 13, she was held inside a system that used her talent to generate enormous wealth while systematically breaking her down. Late in her career, when her addictions and health problems had become impossible to hide, a producer suggested canceling one of her films because she was missing too many days of shooting. Mayer refused. He said, "Judy Garland has made this studio a fortune in good days, and the least we can do is give her one more chance." That sounds generous until you realize the translation. She is still worth something. Extract what remains. Judy Garland died on June 22, 1969. She was 47 years old. The child in one room. Garland was not an isolated case. She was the most visible case. In 1940, 12-year-old Shirley Temple visited MGM. Temple was already the most famous child star in America. She was there for a meeting with producer Arthur Freed. In Freed's office, behind closed doors, the producer exposed himself to the 12-year-old girl. Temple, in her 1988 autobiography, Child Star, described the incident and said her reaction was to laugh, because she was a child, and she did not understand what was happening to her. At the same time, in the room next door, Louis B. Mayer was making it toward Shirley Temple's mother. Let that settle for a moment. The child was in one room. Her mother was being handled in the next. This was not coincidence. This was coordination. This was how the institution operated, not through a single act by a single person, but through a culture that treated access to women and girls as a routine function of doing business. The price of refusal. Not every woman Mayer pursued was a child. Jean Howard was an actress and socialite. Mayer became infatuated with her. She rejected his advances. On one occasion, according to multiple accounts, he chased her around his office in an attempt to force himself on her. Howard eventually married Charles K. Feldman, one of the most powerful talent agents in Hollywood. Mayer's response was immediate and total. He banned Feldman from the MGM lot. He prohibited every MGM production from hiring any actor represented by Feldman. He was willing to sacrifice significant business revenue, to walk away from money, for the sole purpose of punishing a woman who had refused him. He reportedly proposed marriage to Howard and was rejected again. Some accounts suggest his reaction to this second rejection was so extreme that he attempted to harm himself. This is not the behavior of a businessman protecting his interests. This is the behavior of someone who treats other human beings as possessions, and who cannot psychologically tolerate the idea that a possession might say no. The playbook. By now, you may have noticed something. Everything we've discussed about Louis B. Mayer, the recruitment of young and vulnerable people, the use of money and opportunity as bait, the physical control, the isolation within a private compound, the network of enablers who made problems disappear, the weaponization of secrets, the destruction of anyone who tried to speak out. All of it maps, point by point, onto the case that the entire world is examining right now. The settings were different. Mayer operated from a studio lot in Los Angeles. Epstein operated from mansions in Manhattan, a ranch in New Mexico, and an island in the Caribbean. The tools of silence were different. Mayer used 7-year contracts and morality clauses to keep his stars trapped. Epstein, according to court testimony and the files now public, used hidden cameras and a network of financial entanglements. The enablers were different. Mayer had Mannix and Strickling, men who controlled the police and the press. Epstein had Ghislaine Maxwell, a woman who, according to her conviction, used her social position to recruit and groom victims. But the architecture was the same. Step 1. Identify a target. Young, talented, ambitious, and without the resources to fight back. Step 2. Offer something irresistible, a career, a future, an escape from poverty. Step 3. Once they're inside, take control of their body, their schedule, their relationships, their self-image. Step 4. Ensure that anyone who speaks up is discredited, silenced, or destroyed. Step 5. Maintain a network of people whose livelihoods depend on protecting the person at the top. Epstein needed a private island because he operated outside the law and feared exposure. Mayer didn't need an island. In 1930s Hollywood, he was the law. The reckoning that never came. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested on July 6, 2019. He died in his jail cell 1 month later. His associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, was convicted of sex trafficking in 2021. His name became a worldwide symbol of predatory power. Investigations are still unfolding across multiple countries as of this week. Epstein was ultimately exposed. Not enough, not completely, but the world knows his name for what he did, not for what he built. Louis B. Mayer received an honorary Academy Award. He was given a standing ovation on his last day at the studio. Thousands of the biggest names in entertainment attended his funeral and spoke of his greatness. Biographer Scott Iman wrote that Mayer's view of America became America's view of itself. Judy Garland was already dead. Patricia Douglas had been erased. Gene Howard's story was a footnote. The doctors who prescribed pills to teenagers were never named. The police officers who guarded the studio gates were never questioned. The journalists who could have investigated chose to accept invitations to Sunday brunch instead. The system did not fail Louis B. Mayer. The system performed exactly as he designed it. It made him the most powerful man in the entertainment industry. It made him the highest paid person in the United States. And it ensured that when he died, he was remembered as a visionary, rather than held accountable for what happened under his authority. The question we owe them. Right now, millions of people are reading the Epstein files. They are looking at names, flight logs, photographs, and the most common reaction is disbelief. How did this go on for so long? How did so many people look the other way? But here is what this story should tell us. We have asked that question before. We asked it about Mayer, decades after the fact. We asked it about Harvey Weinstein. We will ask it again about someone whose name we don't know yet, in 5 years or 10 years or 20. The answer has never changed. These systems survive because they are designed to survive. They offer rewards for loyalty and consequences for dissent. They surround the person at the center with enough legitimate success, enough Academy Awards, enough box office records, enough charitable donations, enough proximity to presidents and senators that the cost of questioning them feels too high. And the rest of us, the audience, the consumers, the people who bought the movie tickets, who watched the Oscars, who read the magazine profiles and accepted the version of the story we were given, we played our part too. Not because we are guilty, but because the system was built to make our participation effortless and our ignorance comfortable. Louis B. Mayer died in 1957 and was celebrated as a great American. Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019 and was condemned as a predator. The distance between those two outcomes is not about the severity of what they did. It is about whether the system built to protect them was still standing when the questions finally arrived. Mayer's system held. Epstein's eventually did not. But the blueprint, the architecture of power, silence, and control, is older than either of them. And it will outlast them both, unless we decide that the question we keep asking after the fact is one worth asking before. If this is your first time here, this channel covers the untold stories behind Hollywood's most iconic and most controversial figures. More stories like this one are coming. Subscribe if you want to be here when they do.